Vaccine makers are preparing for bird flu. Efforts are underway to produce vaccines for H5N1 or another potential pandemic virus. Minks in Spain, seals in Scotland, sea lions and dolphins in South America. A number of mammal species have recently been found to be infected with H5N1, a highly pathogenic strain of avian influenza. Avian flu is not new. Epidemiologists have been studying it for decades. But the detection of the virus in mammals has many concerned about the potential that it could spill over to humans and cause a larger outbreak. As the world enters the fourth year of a global pandemic caused by a virus that likely came from an animal, concern over another virus potentially uprooting our lives is valid. H5N1 has infected humans before, although human-to-human transmission has rarely been observed. And while the World Health Organization reports that the mortality rate of avian flu in humans is around 56%. One reason avian flu is so lethal is that it infects the lower respiratory tract, which can lead to respiratory failure. If it were to mutate to infect the upper respiratory tract and spread more easily, it would probably cause milder illness. Yet even a virus that causes mild or moderate illness in many people can have a serious toll, as we've seen with the COVID pandemic. So efforts are underway to develop vaccines to protect against such a form of bird flu. Bird flu has spilled over to humans before. In fact, just last week a girl in Cambodia died from H5N1. I'm keeping a close eye on it as an expert, but as a member of the community, as a parent and someone who has been recently experiencing the COVID-19 pandemic, I'm not worried about this right now, says Caitlin Rivers, an epidemiologist at the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security. This is an animal health issue right now that has a theoretical risk to become a human health issue. Avian influenza viruses infect birds by attaching to a receptor in their respiratory tract. In order for the virus to become a human virus and start circulating from person to person in the population, it will have to be able to attach itself to the human version of this receptor, something it hasn't yet evolved to do. It's unfortunately nearly impossible to predict when this jump could happen. None of us know when the next influenza pandemic will emerge. It could be tomorrow, or it could be years from now, and we don't know which of the viruses will become the next pandemic virus, Osterholm says. At the outset, you have to say there is uncertainty, with one exception: there will be a pandemic. The US is somewhat equipped to handle avian flu. There is a stockpile of egg-based flu vaccines for the H5N1 strain. Eggs are one of the most common ways to make a flu vaccine. To create it, manufacturers inject an inactivated or weakened virus into a fertilized chicken egg, incubate the egg for a few days while the virus multiplies, and then harvest the virus to use for the vaccine. The country has a secret chicken stockpile in undisclosed locations across the US just in case we need to make egg-based vaccines quickly, such as during a flu pandemic. It may be concerning that this vaccine strategy depends on an animal that is highly susceptible to the flu in question. But several experts told Scientific American that there are high levels of biosecurity at the chicken facilities in order to avoid bird flu contamination. Alternatives to egg-based vaccines exist. Since the early 2010s, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services has been partnering with CSL Seqirus, one of the largest influenza vaccine manufacturers, to develop vaccines grown in cells in a laboratory. The pandemic preparedness, which targets the H5N1 subtype specifically, is approved by the Food and Drug Administration. And although it's impossible to determine which virus will cause the next pandemic, CSL Seqirus has a library of viruses that have the potential to infect humans. And the company is constantly looking for candidate vaccine viruses that it can tailor to a specific pathogen. We used data for one of the avian strains to create a mock-up file, says Mark Lacey, who runs CSL Seqirus's pandemic preparedness and response team. The team members basically identify certain viruses, use them to create vaccines, and conduct some of the early safety studies so that if an avian flu strain evolves into a true pandemic strain transmitting between humans, they will be ready to go with an adequate vaccine. Lacey says that his company would be able to supply the U.S. government with 150 million doses within the first 6 months of a pandemic being declared, but he thinks the scale-up potential could be higher, especially if multiple manufacturers could help produce it. Because there are 8 billion people in the world, scale-up and widespread collaboration across countries would be necessary to make enough vaccine. That is all for this video. Subscribe and comment down below.